Frankly, home birth takes the bullshit out of having a baby and going. So, pro tip, if you're going to put candles by the tub she's laboring in, make sure they aren't within reach of her head.
And why is that?
Because you could potentially light your hair on fire, Jamie, and how does that feel?
Hey guys, Jamie here. Today we are going to talk about a dad's view of home birth and how he kind of got to feeling supportive of home birth versus fearful and concerned.
And yeah, I was going to say home birth for me was not something I was raised with, not have a lot of familiarity with. So it definitely took a lot of time and attention and education to really get on board with it. But once I was on board with it, I really could get behind it.
So let's talk a little bit about Aiden's birth.
Yep.
Aiden was a C-section in the hospital, obviously, for breech presentation. We had been planning on having him in the hospital all along, but we were planning a very low intervention, unmedicated birth, and then it kind of flipped to be the total opposite. So talk a little bit about how his birth experience was for you.
So Aiden's birth experience was, was one of those things where it was our first kid, and we were planning on doing the hospital thing from day one. It's just kind of on autopilot with what we'd seen, what we grew up with. So the home birth thing didn't really seem like an option, and definitely, everything kind of went off the table when, they said, oh, he's breech, we're gonna have to do a C-section. So we went through the process, right? We went through the hospital and everything, but it was just so much stress and it was just problem after problem, right? So he had to get rushed to the NICU because he wasn't, showing enough oxygenation, which deprived him of having that bond with you. And, I'm trying to, check up with nurses while I go with the kid and try to say, okay, well, how's my wife recovering with the post, and trying to play that game. It was very stressful. And that would have been like one thing, but then the recovery afterward, after seeing how you were cut open and all the limitations you had trying to get back to, and some of the bonding issues that you had with Aiden afterward, I really felt like we're a product of the experience. So not wanting to repeat that for you when we had Camden next started opening my eyes to saying, okay, is there a better way to do this, and is home birth one of those ways?
Yeah, so with my second son, we were planning a VBAC, which is a vaginal birth after cesarean, and we were planning a hospital VBAC, but this time the game plan was a little different. We were going to stay at home as long as possible. The goal was to kind of go in maybe around 7 to 8 centimeters. That way things would kind of just move along once we got to the hospital. Didn't really happen that way, but kind of leading up to his birth, I feel like there was a lot of kind of tension, is this really how we want to do this? Because I think that's when I first brought up home birth to you.
Well, yeah, and so I had a little bit of discomfort with the idea of home birth, and just with all the things that went wrong with Aiden, okay, what if we get in the what ifs, what if we get into this, what if we get into that, which is definitely a good conversation to have. But then we were still kind of putting us in a box where it was the closest birth center to us was 2 hours away.
Yeah.
So to have a home birth VBAC, was that even allowed in South Carolina? I can't remember if it was, but some states do limit home VBAC, so that's another consideration you have to think about. Or if, you can have...
There was an OB who did home VBACs. That's what we were looking into, and he was really far away.
Yeah, he was really far away.
That's what it was.
So sometimes the providers for that kind of thing are very few and far between, depending on where you're at. And...
I mean, I think, honestly, even for myself, with him being a VBAC, as much as I loved the idea of home birth, I don't think I was, all there mentally. Yeah. I don't think I could have had a successful home birth with him.
So we went through, going through the OB office, with the midwives, luckily. But I think that the definite thing that started to pique my interest was we hired a doula. We had a doula for this one. And it was our first time doing it, and we labored at home as long as possible, so... That was a pretty good experience when I looked at the value that the doula really brought to the birth team, if you will. Especially for a dad that's like, trying to work through emotions, kind of really seeing it for the first time as an actual birth, because it was a C-section the first time.
Yeah.
It was more like being in there for surgery. And so that's one big piece of advice I give to all prospective dads is really consider having a doula. No matter if you're going to do it in a hospital, no matter if you're going to do it at home, VBAC, not VBAC, scheduled C-section. I mean, but especially when you're doing the birth thing, like, get a doula. Mm-hmm. It's sometimes mom needs a woman's touch when it comes to helping support, and then sometimes she needs the partner's touch. And I really think that birth being such a feminine experience, a doula that predominantly are female, it's really someone that helps. And dad needs to get 15 minutes to go get a cup of coffee. Doula's there to make sure mom's not alone, and that helps too.
Yeah. So the first time I brought up home birth to you, do you remember that at all?
Yeah, we were talking about it, like birth center, home birth stuff. And then there was this really cool documentary called The Business of Being Born, mm-hmm. which is a New York City midwife.
Yeah, I think it talked about a New York City midwife a little bit, but it also, mm-hmm. I think that was the farm in Tennessee.
Yeah, in Tennessee. Yeah. Okay. But really, the cool thing about Business Being Born was it wasn't so much like to show you how much better, how great home birth really was, but it was really to show you kind of where the pitfalls of the normal hospital type birth, if you will.
Yeah.
For us, after having a traumatic hospital experience, and even with Camden, it was a 36-hour labor, and the hospital, they were pushing certain things,
Yeah.
Oh, you want this? Oh, we don't. Hey, we're going to start talking about maybe cutting you again. If this doesn't proceed and stuff like that. And that was just kind of like a stressful thing,
So, I mean, going into a VBAC and just the way his birth played out, and it was a successful VBAC. He was born vaginally, and that felt like a big
mm-hmm.
win.
Absolutely.
But I feel like in the days after that, like, we both kind of looked back like, what the hell happened?
Yeah. I mean, like, you had told me not to let you get the epidural the whole time, and eventually you decided to get it, and I had to make sure you were sure originally, like, don't let me get this, and then, screaming pain, like, I need this, and you have the gut check, and you're like, am I making the right call, or am I just enabling, or, so there can be some challenge to that, but.
So how did that, like, compare to Amelia's birth, which was a home birth?
Mm-hmm.
We'll get into more kind of like the decision making of how we came to
mm-hmm.
home birth, but like, I mean, knowing how like I ended up needing, like, not even just wanting the epidural, but I really did need it at
mm-hmm.
that point. Knowing that, how did you feel about a home birth where that wasn't even an option? Did that like have any flag of concern for you?
No, it didn't really. What I liked also about the idea of you being at home was, again, I firmly believe that the more relaxed the mom is, the more comfortable the mom is, the better the outcome's typically going to be.
Mm-hmm.
And that's because birth is a very physical experience. I mean, not to say I've ever done it, but I see it can be a very physical experience, but I think there's also a lot of a mental experience. You have a mom who is afraid of a C-section or afraid, there's like a negative objective. So, I don't want to be there, versus home birth, where if it's you want to be, it's a positive objective of, okay, I want to have this baby, I want to go here, I want to go there, and you don't have to, like.
You don't feel like you're fighting against something.
Yeah, you're not fighting a system, you don't have to ask permission to do X, Y, or Z.
So, maybe getting a little more, like, sinister or realistic.
Okay.
I mean, we have to talk about the possibility of death.
Mm-hmm.
During home birth, whether that's for me or the baby. How did you kind of come to terms with accepting that possible outcome?
Well, I just had faith and trust in your body that that it was going to do what it was designed to do.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, there's always a comfort factor in knowing that, you have the emergency room and all the doctors, medical staff, all the king's horses and men, if you will, right there right there downstairs, right? But having an experience seemed to kind of also be that gut check that, yeah, things are going good, or no, things aren't going great. That also kind of helped comfort me in that, okay, if this is going south, that we have a chance to recognize it, multitask, scramble, someone's tending to you while someone's calling 911, and we're going to, do what we can do. But realistically, I mean, there's concern with if you're not getting food and they're pumping you full of drugs that you don't know how to react to. I mean, and anesthesiology, as good as it is, it's not always an exact science, I feel. Mm-hmm. So there was like, where do you want to accept the risk? And to me, after seeing what you went through with Camden's birth and what you went through with Aiden's birth, I thought that with Amelia's birth, we could take the risk the different way. And
did it feel like a natural? Did you just feel like you naturally were like, yeah, this is going to be a less risky way because we faced too many risks the first 2 times in the hospital, or did it kind of take some mental gymnastics to get there and kind of like find that acceptance?
I think that it wasn't mental gymnastics. Like if you all of a sudden, like, our birth plans to go to the hospital and you started having the baby, it would be more mental gymnastics. But it was over so long that I'd come to terms with it by then that it wasn't a bad thing,
Mm-hmm. In a few concise words.
Oh boy.
In a few words, can you describe what Amelia's birth experience was for you?
Amelia's birth experience for me was a very calming after the fact or during?
During and after.
So during was a cool little journey, right? It was almost like a sense of adventure. We're here, we're doing this at home. This is the first time we're doing it like this. It's almost
How
like
did you feel about me, like, being like, oh, my water broke and contractions are getting closer, but not being like, oh, let's pack up and go to the hospital?
Well, I think it was very comforting because we had known, like, okay, your mom's going to come up 3 hours away. We knew, like, okay, I'm going to call my boss and tell my boss, hey, here's what's going on. Like, we planned this kind of stuff. So to me, it was pretty, like, all right, it's on, versus, like, oh my God, we have to do this and that. I mean, like, if you want to pack up in the hospital and you have a kit ready to go, then hey. But it was nice to know that the laboring process wouldn't face some big old transition with, oh my God, are we going too early? Or we took the pressure out of that timing, which is something we definitely felt with Camden's birth.
Yeah.
Lower pressure birth experience. And then afterward, it was right, because there wasn't like any crazy discharge papers we're waiting for and any like hospital food or, oh my God, we got to get the visitors the pass and stuff like that. It was just, come on upstairs. I mean, you had your slice of pizza, the boys got to come right on up and see, like, right after and stuff, and it was just so easy, and it was almost like a no-brainer after the fact, like, yeah, why wouldn't we do it this way?
What do you think the biggest benefit was to having a home birth? Like, looking back on it, comparing it to the first 2 births, obviously there were a lot of different things that were just different, but what do you think, like, the number one benefit would be? Like,
from Dad's perspective, or just from
your perspective? Yeah,
okay.
Like, what was the number one best part or the number one benefit of being at home for Amelia's birth that made it worth the risk?
Well, it was really more so there were some, I'll just say there were some benefits to not having to deal with the hospital admin system and all this crazy stuff here and there, not having to coordinate the visitors and stuff that I touched on earlier. But really the biggest benefit of you being at home was your state of mind. Was you felt calm, you felt safe, you felt in control.
How do you think her birth would have perspired? Just because I had a really weird labor pattern with her. Like, my labor with her was very different from Camden's. How do you feel like things would have, like, perspired if we had gone to the hospital and birthed in the hospital?
If you birthed in the hospital, I
like, what do you think would have been different?
Well, what would have been different was that I don't think you could have changed it up. So sometimes you were in the tub, sometimes you were in the bed or up and walking around and stuff like that. They'd want to monitor you. They'd want to do all this stuff. They'd constantly be checking. They'd constantly be just monitoring all up on you. They'd probably freak out a little bit more about your transitions. I mean, in South Carolina, when I got you in the shower on the exercise ball, there was still concern with how are the nurses going to react and stuff like that.
That was the dumbest thing.
No one was sticking needles in your arm, you know. So, like I said, the bullshit would have been back in the birth experience, where you'd be treated like a patient, not a laboring mother.
Do you think the outcome would have been any different? Do you think the outcome would have been the same? Like, what do you, like, at the end of the day, like, okay, there might have been more of a, like, pain in the ass to deal with, but some people feel that extra pain in the ass is worth it. Well, so, like, what do you think would have actually been different or worse about being in the hospital besides just, like, kind of like the admin crap?
Well, the outcome could have been different. You know, sometimes it's a crapshoot. Who's the doctor? What's their experience? What's their comfort level? What's their XYZ? How many hours they have left on their shift? You just never know. And would we have a doctor pushing you to do XYZ? Would this doctor roll over your midwives that were there? You know, would you know, nurses be pushing? Things would be a little more, I don't want to say hostile, but like as soon as you don't go with the flow, are they going to start like, oh, we got one of these or one of those, and start pushing stuff? And realistically, it's not so much of what they're recommending, because they mean well. They really do. This is what they feel is best. The problem is if you don't agree with it and your mind starts getting into that defensive mode, it's not going to be good for your birth experience. It's not going to let you get in the zone, dig deep, and just have the baby. You're treated like a patient that they have to cure. Like you're on an episode of House, like, oh, she's progressive. You know, try this, try that. You know, but it's more so at home. It's more so like you're having a baby, and we're in the comfort of our home, and we're doing this. Family's here, family's downstairs. It's so much less stressful, which is ultimately the benefit is to the mom when it's not so stressful.
Yeah.
You're going through enough.
Seriously.
You're going through enough with that 10-pound 4-ouncer.
You can brag.
Yep, Amelia was 10 pounds 4 ounce, no drugs. When I tell guys at work like that, they're like, ugh. When I tell women that I work with that, they're like, ugh, my God, your wife's insane. And it's just like, you know, at the hospital, maybe that would have been a pain in the ass, or maybe they'd have pushed drugs at you or something like that. But like, you can do it. You're a VBAC that did 10 pound 4 ounce and no drugs at home.
Yeah.
It can be done.
So what is your advice for any dad out there whose wife or significant other really, 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 really wants a home birth, but he's just not feeling safe about it? He's not totally sold. He's not sure, like, the investment is worth it. What would be, like, a quick, like, one-line piece of advice to all the dads out there watching right now, wondering, like, why the hell would he be on board with that?
Well, I'll just tell the dads, right, like, if your wife is healthy and good, I mean, her body's designed to, you know, deliver a baby. And you just gotta let her do that if that's what she wants to do. Putting her in the hospital and stuff is just gonna elevate stress. And if you elevate the stress, the outcome's gonna be worse.
So, to kind of, like, pare that down to, like, one, like, piece of advice, like, one hard piece of advice, what is it?
Trust her. Trust her body. Plus, you can have beers in the delivery room waiting. I'm just saying, you can't do that in the hospital. I'm just saying, you can't do that in the hospital. I mean, think about it. You want to...
What would you have done if I did transfer to the hospital? Like, how do you think you would have reacted? Do you think you would have a different opinion on home birth?
No, I don't necessarily think so. I think it just would have been a bum outcome, and I'd have felt bad for you, because I know you wanted to do that. And, you know, like, I know I have some opinions about hospital and hospital birth, but, like, it's not a bad thing. Like, thank God we have it, you know, with Aiden being breech, you know, it takes a specially experienced doctor, which, you know, we didn't happen to have around the area. So it's not like I'm going to say that C-sections are always wrong and always unwarranted. No, it's absolutely medically necessary sometimes. But it still is traumatic and impactful on the mom. And if it can be avoided through...
Do you feel like it was traumatic and impactful for you at all?
Oh, absolutely. Not so much during. I mean, there's the stress of me chasing Aiden down, being with him in the NICU and stuff like that. But more so in the recovery of, you know, your challenges bonding with him, establishing the breastfeeding relationship, really trying to get that skin-to-skin contact. You know, all those things that have, that you know, all those things that really have benefit were kind of robbed out of that experience.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not just, like, for your own, you know, photo opportunity and stuff. I mean, like, legit, the kid needs skin-to-skin contact when they're born.
What did it feel like being, like, going from being in the NICU, like, with that kind of stress, like, having to deal with that, to just, like, having this low-key birth at home where there was, like, no drama?
Oh, man, it was, like, day and night, and in the good way. You know, it was like, hey, the baby's here. You could really focus on being happy and being happy for mom versus being like, oh, God, I have to make sure my kid is safe. I have to monitor this. Was my wife okay? And playing a telephone game with nurses and doctors and trying to chase down someone for any info.
Yeah. What was the funniest part? Or what is your favorite moment of not Amelia's birth, but the labor with Amelia? Like, do you have a favorite moment or a funniest moment?
So, I mean, obviously, every birth that we've gotten pictures for, I troll you with me flashing a thumbs up somewhere. which apparently I'm not the only dad that does that. So, dads, you can have fun time if you hire a photographer trolling mom a little bit. Screaming in labor pains, and outside across the street, kids were playing a snowball fight, and they were yelling, and then you'd start screaming, and then they'd stop and be deathly quiet.
I forgot about that.
Yeah.
That was pretty funny. So if you are planning a home birth, maybe warn your neighbors or keep your windows closed.
Yeah.
That was really funny. I forgot about that.
Yeah. Dads, just gonna warn you, she's gonna poop.
So if you enjoyed this video, you can go ahead and give it a thumbs up for me and hit subscribe so that you can get more labor tips, tricks, breastfeeding tips and tricks, and maybe we'll do another segment with old Subby here.
Beers included?
Beer can be included.
Okay, then.
Alright. We can make this fun.
Alright.
Birth doesn't have to be boring. Birth can be fun.
And any dads want to ask a question, I can try to answer the question from the dad's perspective.
If there's any dads out there with a question, go ahead and submit the question in the comments, and we can do a Q&A session with old Subby here.
Oh, yep.
Alright. See you guys next time.
Alright, have a good one, everyone.